What is up guys, Deadset here. With patch 2.1 on the horizon and the advent of both ladders and competitive rifting, we have just a little more time left to explore what kind of a build you could be going for on your Crusader at the end game. Today I'm going to talk about two underappreciated skills, the Underdog Spender Shield Bash and the Fallen Out of Favor Condemn. What on earth am I doing with those two skills? Let me tell you. First, let me briefly mention why it is important to talk about a Shield Bash build. First of all, as former rally-based Crusaders know well, no build lasts forever at the top, and it's important to have other ideas beside Holy Shotgun and Firestarter. Second, Travis Day, who is the lead game designer of Reaper of Souls, said himself that Shield Bash is an important part of the Crusader fantasy and that the Diablo team is already looking into improving the skill. In my opinion, Shield Bash is already strong, the numbers are big enough for Torment 6, and mostly things like the hitbox and the wind-up animation should be looked over. So if Shield Bash gets improved even further, it's going to be a strong contestant for the top spot in the Crusader build variety. So, let's go over the skills. Shield Bash with Shield Cross is going to be the primary damage dealer of the build. It delivers a massive blow of 700% weapon damage plus 300% of the shield's block chance as damage. On top of that, it erupts into a large cross-like formation for additional 155% weapon damage and 100% of the shield block chances damage on any enemy caught within the area of effect. I think Shield Cross is the most reliable of all 5 Shield Bash runes. It lacks the problematic targeting of the other runes, and since it shares the physical element of Pound, which is a stronger single target rune, you don't need to re-gear and can easily switch between the two right before the Rift Guardian, like I will do in the demonstration. Condemn with Vacuum is the second damage dealer of the build, but it doesn't fit the elemental bonuses of the gear, and I'm using it mostly as a utility spell that draws enemies towards me and makes them ripe targets for my shield crosses. It has a suction range much larger than the 15-yard explosion area. I would say it's easily 25 yards, and you will see it draw enemies both large and small, which makes it one of the more reliable displacement skills in Diablo. To sweeten the deal, Vacuum procs the Strongarm Racer effect, which fits perfectly in a build with a discounted spender that doesn't really require Reaper's reps. I'm using a Blade of Prophecy in the demonstration to improve the damage of the build even further, but that's a bonus rather than a requirement. Laws of Valor with Critical is my low of choice for the build, adding a nice bit of burst on top of our already sizable hits. With the improved uptime of lows in patch 2.05, Critical is guaranteed to be up in any fight that matters, and as I already mentioned, the Wrath requirements for the Shield Bash spam are so small that the Holy Shotgunner favorite Unstoppable Force would be a huge overkill in this build. I favored Steed Charge with Endurance as the mobility skill in the demonstration. With its longer duration, it will take you places faster than the other rune options. It is by no means set in stone, and if you feel that this choice is deprived of flavor, you can put in Ramming Speed, which has the added bonus of knocking back the enemies you trample and proccing your strong arms for additional damage. Provoke with Charged Up is a rather unsurprising choice. Mechanics-wise, Provoke is one of my favorite skills of the Crusader, with a trifold effect that is useful in every aspect. It's the only cooldown that restores Wrath, it attracts your enemies so you have an easier time bashing their skulls in with your shield, and it adds a nice damage bonus for the 4-second duration. In case you're dissatisfied with your survivability, you can go with the more defensive Too Scared to Run rune, that will limit the damage output and maneuverability of your enemy. Finally, Akarat's champion with Prophet is going to turn us into a defensive juggernaut while retaining the sweet 35% damage bonus that all Crusaders crave. I picked Prophet for two reasons. First, I wanted to prove that Shield Bash can hold its own without falling on the Firestarter to back up the damage department. Second, the way Shield Bash actually works will constantly put you in danger right in the thick of the fight, and since we are unable to maintain the distance that Holy Shotgun and Firestarter allow, any additional protection is welcome. We won't be needing the additional Wrath regeneration from Embodiment of Power, so Prophet is the logical third option. As for passives, Heavenly Strength doesn't need much of an explanation in a two-handed build, which is the case here since I'm using a Blade of Prophecy. If you don't have the Blade of Prophecy, but you have a decent Doombringer lying around, you'll replace this passive with Fervor. Finery is a nice damage boost since 7 sockets is the norm for most gear sets. Towering Shield is another obvious choice you can hardly argue with a 20% increase to the damage of your main spender. If you feel that the 30% cooldown reduction to Shield Glare is wasted in my setup, you can insert it in your own, but it simply felt out of place for me. I picked Vigilant as a defensive passive in the demonstration, which is not a very orthodox choice, but the 20% damage reduction from non-physical sources is noticeable in elite fights. If you're still not a fan, Holy Cause is also an option for the damage boost and the occasional healing from your condemns. I would say though that this build benefits little from Wrathful since our Wrath costs are very minimal and we have to look for sources of healing elsewhere. This is it for the build. Now let's go over the gear. I won't surprise anyone by saying that the 6-piece set bonus of Akan is mandatory for Torment 6 Crusaders. I'm using all 6 pieces with the helm, with Shield Bash bonuses no less, the chest, shoulders, gloves, pants and boots, granting me the 50% cooldown reduction of Akarat's champion without the need of a Ring of Royal Grandeur. Some additional cooldown reduction across your gear will be needed if you want to be permanently in Akarat's champion form. I'm using a physical damage Stone of Jordan with bonuses to an elemental damage of your choice and a huge boost against elites. It has turned into a standard ring for endgame specs of any class. My other ring is a Unity, the solo player's ring of choice. Aside from the bonus against elites, which is always welcome, it offers unrivaled damage reduction when used between yourself and your follower, along with the immortality relic for him. It has already been confirmed by Blizzard that this is intended interplay, but if you're still not a fan or you play in groups more often, you can replace it with a Ring of Royal Grandeur and go for a crafted Captain Crimson 2-piece, or even go for a well-rolled Justice Lantern for the additional block chance, since it does translate into additional Shield Bash damage. This Rondal's Locket rounds out the jewelry. As you can see, it rolled really well and there's little more you could want from a physical damage amulet. It doesn't have some amazing unique property, but the raw stats more than make up for it. The Strongarm Racers are an excellent addition to the build, with a strong displacement skill at your disposal in the face of Condemn, and even an S of Johan on your follower. If you have one, you will have the Strongarm proccing in fights constantly. You don't need additional Wrath regeneration from Reaper's Reps, so you're free to use the Bracer slot as a huge damage booster. Rounding out the armor slots is the usual Harrington Waistguard choice, the only belt in the game that can have the perfect toughness stats for Torment 6 and double your DPS when you open a loot container, such as a chest, a dead body, or even a loose tile on the ground. As for the weapon and offhand, I'm using a Blade of Prophecy as my main hand, which has the unique property of triggering additional condemn explosions on enemies that you've initially condemned. I would like to add that this weapon helps but isn't mandatory for this build to work. easing the gearing requirements at least a little bit. I've had success with a Doombringer one-handed sword, which has physical damage bonuses, or even a simple, hard-hitting two-hander like the Scourge. The offhand is the true powerhouse of the build, the Pyro Morella crafted shield that lowers the wrath costs of shield bash between 40 and 50%. This turns the skill's hefty initial cost of 30 wrath to a very manageable 15, allowing you a lot of freedom to go for offensive skills and gear rather than utility. As you can see, I went for a pure damage roll on the shield with crit chance, cooldown reduction and shield bash bonus, and I would advise you to do the same since it is a craftable shield and you can make them to your heart's content until you get the desired rolls. The Paragon points are the usual affair for Akan set builds, 25% movement speed and the rest in strength in the core section, cooldown reduction and the rest in crit damage and crit chance in offense, all resistance and then armor or life percentage according to your needs in defense, and area damage and resource cost reduction in utility. Well, this is it for the Shield Bash build. If you liked what you saw, I would appreciate your subscription to my channel. Also, check out my Twitch, as tomorrow I'm starting a Crusader build marathon. Talk to me on Twitter and Facebook that I added to the video description below, and I'll see you guys next time.